Hello, welcome to Benji's garden. Please join me as I show you around my garden and show you what's in flower at the moment. This is the Country Parson, a new David Austin rose released in 2020. Very beautiful yellow flowers, very fragrant. It says that it's a Scots Rose descent, so I assume that it is actually a Scots Rose Hybrid. Very lovely. This is Alan Titchmarsh, also known as the Huntingdon Rose. Beautiful nodding flowers. Loads of petals. What you'd call a typical David Austin rose. Unfortunately, I don't detect any fragrance with this one. It's still beautiful nonetheless. This is Grace, and this is what it looks like when it first starts to open. Very beautiful. What you describe as a typical English shrub rose, but it's very fragrant. It smells like tea. And this is what it looks like when it's in full bloom. Beautiful. This is Masqurade Climber. It is very scented. It's got these lovely buds, can you see? Sort of like a flame. And then it just opens to that. And then you've sort of got these sort of red rosy tips. It's really lovely. This is actually a sport because the normal plant is a shrub. Speaking of sports, here's one in action. This is a red flowering, the fairy, on a white fairy flowering plant. And you can tell it's slightly different by the fact that it's got these dark stems, whereas on the rest of the plant it's just green. So what I'll do is I'll let this flower and then I'll take a cutting of it and hopefully it should take, and then I've got a new plant, providing the sport remains stable. Blue for You is doing very well now. It's starting to come out in flower. It grows quite large, as you can see, compared to when they first opened. Oh, I'm being graced by a bee. The Viburnum is doing very well for me this year. As you can see, it's now in full flower. And it just seems to be getting really tall, and I'm hoping to take cuttings this year. The Granny's bonnets are still doing well. They're quite healthy and happy, as you can see. This one is Ruby Port. This is Double Delight, a very fragrant hybrid tea. Every bloom is different, not one is the same. And this is quite an old rose bush of mine now. I've had it for quite a few years, but I love the foliage on this. And this is how the buds start. Definitely recommended. I have a volunteer foxglove. I grew these a few years ago from seed, and this one just seems to have appeared here. I love it, so I hope to save some more seeds so I can grow some more. This is Susan Williams-Ellis, a beautiful white flowering rose. This is actually a sport, like I said, with the Masqurade and the Fairy white. This is a sport of the Mayflower, and this is a beautiful rose. And this is apparently David Austin's most healthy rose. I never have no issues with it. As you can see, there's no black spot on here. Whereas with others, I'm constantly taking off all the leaves that have black spot. And this has just gone a bit wild for me this year. There's so many buds coming. So it's going to look lovely. The only thing I will say is that the blooms don't tend to last very long. It's usually 2 to 3 days at the most. This is the Country Parson again. And it completely fades to white over time, but the blooms have lasted a really long time. I'm quite happy with this rose. It's starting to become one of my new favourites. I would definitely get this if you can get it. This is another favourite of mine. This is Reines de Violets, a beautiful hybrid perpetual rose from the 1800s. I've managed to train it in a fan shape, and I've got all these gorgeous blooms. Definitely a good rose to have in the garden. Another Lady Hillingdon, a lovely climbing rose, extremely fragrant, has these beautiful peach flowers. Definitely worth having. This is my first herbaceous peony to open this year, very beautiful. It has sort of rosy blooms to it. It's very fragrant. I do only have two coming. This one is starting to open. I do have more peonies yet to come, as you can see, but they haven't opened just yet. The lupins are starting to open. They're not terribly reliable in my garden. I tend to have them for 2 years at the most and then they disappear, but this one seems to have clung on. Here are some of my bearded irises. This is a lovely blue. And this is a beautiful purple. Unfortunately, I don't know the names of them, but I've had them for a few years now. The Hydrangea is looking beautiful, as you can see. This is the tub that I potted up, as you can see. All the Cape Daisies have opened, the Petunias have opened, and I've got a lovely Gerbera. Very pleased with this one. This is Mutabalis, that's now finally in flower. And these beautiful blooms. It has a strong, spicy fragrance to it. It is really a lovely rose, and I recommend it if you have the space. I still have mine in the container at the moment, but I'll be putting it into a large container very soon. And here is Dusky Maiden, finally opened. Very large blooms. It doesn't quite show up on camera, but it's actually very, very deep burgundy in colour. This is Tuscany Superb. It is a Gallica rose, very fragrant, very rich, deep burgundy flowers. Unfortunately, it only blooms once, but it's still a good rose to have in the garden. This is Madame Alice Garnier. It is a rambling rose. It is quite fragrant. It does repeat bloom for me, and it tends to stay more close to the ground, so it's more like a ground cover for me rather than a rambling rose, so it's still very lovely though. This is Gruss and Aachen. Very beautiful blooms, light pink, and they fade to white as they open more. It is lightly fragrant, and the shrub itself is dwarf, so it's ideal to be grown in a container. It has a weird classification because it's classified as a floribunda, hybrid tea, or an early hybrid tea, as well as a polyantha. It has fragrant flowers which can change depending on the temperature. It is compact and it's ideal for growing in containers, so it makes a very good rose to have for the garden. This is Allisar Princess of Phoenica. As you can see, as it opens, it looks like that. Peachy flowers, deep burgundy centre, and as it fades, it takes on this deep pink. This is Lover's Meeting, a very fragrant burnt orange rose. It is a hybrid tea, very healthy, and always does well in my garden. Another weird thing about the fairy white rose is that it does contain red blotches, as you can see, throughout them. Usually I tend to get really strange ones where half of the rose is red and half is white. I do really love this rose, but it does throw up some unusual blooms on occasion. This is my beautiful climbing rose. It starts off like this with very creamy flowers and opens up to pure white. It is very fragrant and very vigorous as it's grown very, very tall. So after flowering I'll need to prune it, but it does repeat flower very well for me every year. But unfortunately I don't know the name. A funny story with this one is this is actually rescued from a house that was being knocked down, and I saved it. I got it very early one morning to dig it up before the builders came, otherwise it would have completely got destroyed. So it ended up in my garden, and there are so many buds, if you can see, and it just climbs completely up there, which I can't get up to just yet, so I have to leave it. But it's one of my favourite roses. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please hit the subscribe button and join me for more videos like this again. Thank you. Bye bye.